So as you noticed in the title of the video, I'm going to try to figure out what is the perfect rifle cartridge, if that even exists. Now, let's be honest, this is a very subjective thing. What I feel is, meets the criteria for the best rifle all around is going to be completely different from what you may think. However, I've watched several videos on things like this before, and I kind of get annoyed by the generic responses. So, yeah, it's a subjective thing. Yeah, it depends on the application, and it depends on a whole variety of things, which I will touch on as well. But let's just put some opinions out there. It's not to try to cause debate or argument, but hey, why not just say what we think is the best? So that's what we're going to do. Now, let's be clear on what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about centerfire bolt action rifles. Okay, so we're not talking about guns in general. We're not talking about handguns of any type. We're not talking about shotguns. We're not talking about rimfire rifles. We're talking about centerfire bolt action rifles. Now, it does depend on what you want to do with a rifle, on what it's going to mean to you. So, if you're only a hunter, that's the only thing you're going to be doing, then of course there are going to be certain calibers that meet your criteria for what a good caliber or cartridge should be. If you're looking for the most efficient round, you're not really concerned with, is this the flattest shooting round, but you're more concerned with, am I getting the most bang for my buck with this round? Am I getting the most I can possibly get out of it, yet with the recoil I want, or using the amount of powder that I want per round, or whatever the case? Or is your goal long-range shooting only? So if my goal is to build a rifle to shoot at 1,000 yards and win competitions, that's going to be, dramatically different than going out and killing a white-tailed deer. So let's talk about that first. So what do you look for in a hunting cartridge? Well, usually you want something that's flat shooting, it's had a lot of speed, and it has a lot of energy. And generally that means you're going to put a lot of powder behind the bullet, okay? So if you're hunting and that's your only thought is, I want to kill this elk at 200 yards or whatever the case, and I want it to be a flat shooting round that's going to hit the elk with a lot of energy, the elk's going to fall right there or not get very far, I want it to be easy to get to him, and that's all I'm going to be doing with the round. Well, in that case, it's pretty clear. All you got to do, as a lot of bullet manufacturers and cartridge manufacturers have discovered, is put a lot of powder behind that bullet. So, you have a 270 is my example here. You have a 270. It's basically a 30-06 case, neck down to 27 caliber, 6.8 millimeter. Put a lot of powder behind that bullet, and it's going to come out of the muzzle with a lot of velocity. It's going to be very flat, and it's going to have a good punch to it, and it could do the trick for sure. A 7 millimeter Magnum is another example of that. It's actually going to be a little faster, a little more punch. And then if you're actually hunting for elk specifically, you might want to move up to a 30-06 or a 300 Winchester Magnum, whatever the case. But it's not hard to find a hunting bullet that's going to be perfect for that application. You just basically are going to have a long cartridge, a long case filled with a lot of powder, and it's going to come screaming out of your muzzle at a high rate of speed with a lot of energy behind it, and it's going to be shooting flat. If that's your criteria, you honestly don't care if it's efficient. I've heard a lot of people say that the 7 millimeter Remington Magnum is very good at its power. It's very good at its doing what it's trying to do, but it's really not that efficient. It takes a lot more powder within that case to get a little bit more performance. But if you're a hunter, you don't care about that. If you're trying to knock sheep off of ledges out west at long distances, the 7mm Magnum might be just what you want, and you don't care if it's efficient. Whatever it takes to get that little bit more of performance is what you're after. If you're shooting elk at 300 yards, you're not going to be shooting it with a 243, or at least you shouldn't. You want something that's going to still have a lot of energy at 300 yards, and it's going to have some knockdown power. So a 300 Winchester Magnum would probably be the ticket for that. So you're not going to care if it's a long action. And generally speaking, in a hunting cartridge, you have a lot of powder there that has to burn. And to get the potential out of that round, you're going to have probably a slower burning powder, which is going to take a longer barrel. Because remember, the goal of a hunting round is performance. You don't care about efficiency. You want performance. You don't want a quickly burning powder that's going to give you 75% of the performance you want, but you want a slow burning powder that's going to give you 100% of what you're looking for. So probably going to have a 24-inch barrel. Doesn't have to be, but probably a 24-inch barrel, sometimes a 26-inch barrel. So you're going to have a long barrel and a long action. The gun's probably going to be heavier. It's burning a lot of powder. It could be kind of expensive to shoot, but in all honesty, you don't care about any of that stuff because you're a hunter. You want the performance. You're not going to be shooting at 700 or 800 yards. At least you shouldn't be ethically. So if that 270 peters out at 500 yards and dies because it was never meant at that twist rate and at that design to be accurate at that range, it doesn't have the ballistic coefficient, it doesn't matter to you because you're not going to be shooting at that range anyway. In fact, you might be relegated to a 200-yard shot, in which, once again, none of those ballistic coefficient arguments, none of those downrange, extreme accuracy at long range arguments matter to you. So you're not looking at long range. You're looking at hunting distances, ethical hunting distances, and you're looking at taking down game, which you want ultimate performance. And so I give an example as the 270. Efficiency. Now, so what I wrote here is getting maximum performance, but within purposeful restraints or intended restraints, such as case length, barrel length, or felt recoil. An example is a 308. So a 308 in performance will never match up to a 30-06. A lot of people will tell you they're basically the same thing, but they're not. If you're looking at the numbers and you compare the two, the 30-06, it's going to have about the same velocity, possibly a little bit more. It's going to have a lot more energy, okay? It's just going to be more powerful. And if you load both rounds to their potential, the 30-06 is going to win on performance. It's why a lot of hunting rounds are going to be based off the 30-06. The 270, the 25-06, the 280 Remington are all based off the 30-06 case, and they're all really, I would consider them hunting cartridges. Now 308, what it does is it gets, let's just say 90% of the performance of a 30-06, maybe 80%. Whatever the case, it gets the majority of the performance of a 30-06, but yet it does it with quite a bit less powder, a significant amount less powder, a smaller case, and overall a more efficient design. It's shooting the same bullets, though it's really not going to be shooting like the 200 or 220 grain bullets as good as a 30-06 would, but basically it's shooting the same bullets more efficiently, and it's going to recoil less, and it's going to use up less powder. So, if that means something to you, if you're thinking, I don't quite need all that energy, I don't quite need that much case, I would rather get the bulk of the performance of the 30-06 in a shorter action with probably a 22-inch barrel versus a 24-inch barrel. And it's going to kick less. I would prefer that. And so that's a good example of an efficient case. You want to get performance. It's not like a person who likes efficient cartridges doesn't want performance. Of course they do. But they're willing to sacrifice some performance, some velocity, some flat shooting capability, some energy for some of those other things that I mentioned, like recoil, whatever the case. And pretty much any case based off of 308 seems to be a very efficient round, and there's other ones as well. The last category is long range. Now, if you're wanting to shoot at 1,000 yards, it's a totally different ball game. You're not going to pick up a 270. It's not to say you can't shoot at 1,000 yards with a 270. Of course you can. But you're wanting accuracy and consistency at long ranges. You're wanting high ballistic coefficiency. And apparently I didn't finish that sentence when I wrote it down. But the point here is you are not thinking about knockdown power. You're not thinking about, does this bullet still have enough energy at 1,000 yards or 800 yards to ethically kill an animal? That means nothing. You're punching paper, or you're hitting a gong, or you're hitting metal at long ranges. So killing power, bullet design, as far as penetration, stuff like that, it doesn't mean anything. All you're concerned with is accuracy. Therefore, as soon as that bullet leaves your muzzle, how is it going to act? Is it a ballistically efficient round? Is it aerodynamic? Is it going to, stay true to where it's going? Is it going to buck the wind? Is it going to be as accurate as possible? And even more than accurate, is consistently accurate. Am I going to continue to shoot and it hit the same spot over and over again? A 338 Lapua is a good example of a cartridge really designed for that. Designed for military application, to punch heavy targets, maybe body armor, whatever the case, at long ranges. Now, there's many other cartridges that would be good for long range, and they're not all big, massive, heavy cartridges like the Lapua or like a 50 BMG. They could be a 6.5 Creedmoor. They could be a 6.5 284. They could be smaller things. But the point is, they have a design made or intended for that. A 338 Lapua or a 50 BMG, for instance, would both be excellent guns at long range. Those guns are not efficient, in my opinion. Pound for pound, in their own way, maybe they are. But when I'm talking about efficiency, I'm talking about, not being a ton of extra recoil if you can avoid it, not burning a ton of extra powder if you can avoid it. And though in that round, the 338 Lapua is going to burn a ton of powder, it's going to knock your arm off. You're going to end up having to get a very heavy rifle. Not only it might possibly be more accurate, but it's also going to kick less because it's heavier. You're also going to need a muzzle brake on there just to tone down the recoil. So it's not an efficient round. Could it be a long-range hunting round? Perhaps. But honestly, within ethical ranges, it's probably way too much for most game, unless it was a moose or something. Probably going to tear up a lot of meat. It's really not a hunting round. It's not an efficient round, at least comparative to a 308. It's a great long-range military round. So, a long-range shooter doesn't care, I don't think, whether it's a long action or whether it's a short action, whether it's efficient or whether it's flat shooting. They care about it being accurate, being consistent, and therefore they're looking for the highest ballistic coefficients. They are looking for rounds that or let me start over there, looking for barrels that have the correct twist rate, because usually the heavier bullets within that caliber are going to have the highest ballistic coefficients. They're looking for the heavier bullets also to reduce wind drift, but they're just concerned about punching paper, hitting gongs, whatever the case, at long ranges. So this is just the first video in a series, but I want to kind of put these three categories out there. And in my opinion, all centerfire rifle cartridges are designed for at least one of these three things. Some of them primarily for these three things. And I would give these examples. Okay. And there's many cartridges that can fall in one of these three categories. And there's many cartridges that can fall in more than one category. And some probably could fall in all three categories. This would probably be one that people would argue probably would. And I would not disagree with that. So this is the beginning. This is the three categories I'm going to rank the cartridges in. And in my estimation, in order to be the perfect rifle cartridge, it has to be applicable for all three of these categories. And it has to be rated highly in all three. So this is the beginning. Stay tuned, and there will be other videos coming. And we're going to go deep into this. Not get too nerdy about it, but just talk about it. I'm going to give my opinions, and I'm going to give you a winner. I'm not just going to do this and then say it's up to you, it's whatever you want, even though that's the correct answer. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you what I think is the winner. So stay tuned for that. It should be very interesting.